So I used to think early in my career that you had to live in a big city to do big stories. When I first came to Roanoke, I was a rookie reporter. My hair was still dark. I was not going to be there long. I was on my way up. I said, don't even put me on the waiting list for the good parking lot. I'm not going to be here that long. almost 30 years later, here I am. And I would not have written either of these books had I not stayed in this place. I tell people in Roanoke, or I tell people from outside that if a story breaks, I might not know somebody at the event, like the Virginia Tech shootings, for instance, but I know somebody who's going to get me to somebody in that story. And both of these stories grew out of reporting that I don't think I would have had a context for seeing the story had I not stayed in one place for so long. So this is the food pantry that I think of as the iconic picture from Factory Man. A friend of mine was a freelance photographer named Jared Sories. He self-assigned himself. He had quit the paper and he was going to be a freelancer. And he was really interested in Martinsville because it had had the highest unemployment rate in the state for over a decade. And he had been spending a lot of time there thinking he might publish a book or a freelance piece. And he invited me to collaborate with them. And this is a food pantry in Ridgeway, which is just outside of Martinsville in Henry County. And Jared took this picture. What you don't see here is still on Friday mornings, which is food distribution day, people show up 2 hours before the doors open, some of them on walkers and canes. And you could tell what some of them used to do for work before the jobs went away by their disfigurements. Some of the men who culled furniture, missing fingers, some of the women who spent decades over sewing machines, making sweatshirts, kind of hunchback. And the director told me we're the last resort to come and stand in line for a box of bowl of food. So, nobody before Jared had really tallied what was going on down in Martinsville, and I'm so grateful for him bringing me into this story, and then the newspaper for letting me first kind of find out what there was to write about down there. And he said the people were really open and almost like desperate for somebody to come and pay attention to what had happened to them. And what had happened to them in the aftermath of globalization was food stamps tripled. Disability rates went up 64%. Crime, property crime, crime related to meth and heroin had shot up too. And so one of the first things I did when I started looking around for how to tell this story is I always just, because I've been there so long, I tend to know people who know people, and I took my neighbor out. I mean, this is kind of like the best story in my life, falls into my lap, because my neighbor 3 doors down tells me about this guy who doesn't live in Henry County anymore, but he used to, and his name's John Bassett III. And he lays out the whole story, the whole history of economics in the region. And this is my neighbor, owns a furniture store called Virginia Furniture Market, and he makes his money selling mostly imported furniture. And I actually wrote the book proposal for Factory Man while seated in a recliner that he sold me at the family discount rate, or the neighbor discount rate. So he told me about John Bassett, and not only that he had kept his factory going in Galax, Virginia, but also that there was a family feud involved, and that it had roiled the industry, and that you could tell the whole story of really factories in our country through his family, the Bassett family, which had once been the largest furniture maker in the world. I mean, it was the suit of furniture behind door number 3 and Let's Make a Deal. It was a big deal. And so I said to him, my neighbor Joel, I said, well, what's he like? He said, who sues China from Galax, Virginia, a town better known for bluegrass and barbecue, and wins? And by this point, I had sort of figured out in my storytelling career, if everybody does this thing, i.e. close their factories, and then this one guy does this thing, and wins, it's probably a pretty good story. But my question for Joel was, what's he like? Is he a good talker? I always want to know if somebody's a good talker. And he said, oh, are you kidding? He says things like, the effing Chi-Coms aren't going to tell me how to make furniture. And I thought, who says that? I've got to go to Galax and meet this guy. So I met him. He took one look at me. My hair was long, it was in a ponytail, and I'd been told to dress down because his son, who kind of coordinates his media for him, Doug, who was very nice, as opposed to John, who sometimes is not very nice, said, dress down, we'll be in and out of the factory. So I had hiking shoes on, jeans, my hair back in a ponytail, and John Bassett took one look at me. I could see what he was thinking, and he thought to himself, what the hell is the newspaper thinking sending this damn hippie down here to end Anyways, well, this damn hippie was pretty darn prepared, and he was surprised. I knew the whole story about his family. I even knew about his mean brother-in-law, and I sort of disarmed him, and thus began kind of this great story. I really felt like I was born to tell in many ways. And so this is something that happened after the case. This is actually a moment I got to witness. This was supposed to be the peak moment of the book. And that is, John Bassett has won his case at the Court of International Trade. He's collected $52 million in anti-dumping duties. He's proved that the Chinese are illegally underpricing their product in our market to make American furniture makers go out of business. And now he's announcing to the press and the public this great moment where he's standing on his conveyor belt and he's going to reopen a vacant plant next door. And right before he goes on, he looks at me over his sawdust-covered glasses and he says, well, when you never went cheap with the other woman down the street, meaning China, you don't have to come drag assing back. So the book comes out July of 14. It gets pretty good reviews, which kind of stunned me. I've never written a book. I just turned 50, and I'm, just feeling really, really grateful. And then about a month later, Tom Hanks tweets this. I don't know how he got the book, and I could pretend that I don't have it memorized, but I do. But I guess he liked it, right? So, and then about a month later, his production company optioned it, and it was originally in development to become an HBO miniseries, but now it's going to be, we are hopeful, it's going to be a movie. So the script is being written, and it's super exciting. So I called John Bassett that night to tell him that, because every day you get a phone call saying, Tom Hanks wants to play you in the movies, right? So he was typical John Bassett. You never know quite what he's going to say, and he was super excited and congratulating me. And then he had to just like put me in my place, and he goes, well, just remember, as my father used to say, the higher the monkey climbs up the tree, the more it shows its ass. But seriously, I think the book worked because I think it met with my life theme. I think it allowed me to tell the story of the forgotten people who had been left behind in the aftermath of globalization. I give them the last word after the scene on the conveyor belt. And to me, that's why the book works. He is also a great character. And believe me when I say we have experienced just about every emotion, high and low, that there is to experience. I've probably spent more time talking to him during the 2 years that I was reporting this than I did my own family. He would call all the time, and he was constantly trying to control what I wrote. But if you think he's tough, this is one of the heroes of True Vine. Her name's Nancy Saunders. When I first met her, she ran a little soul food restaurant called The Goodie Shop on Melrose Avenue. Anybody ever been to Chuck? Have you been to The Goodie Shop? Great place. an interesting place. I was always the only white person there when I went, and there was never any menu on the wall. You were just supposed to know that Monday was spaghetti, Tuesday was pork chops, and you didn't dare ask, because you might get your head bitten off. But the first time I heard about George and Willie Muse, they were her great uncles, Nancy's great uncles. I was driving around with a photographer named Don Peterson, who had grown up in Roanoke, and he had heard the story about the Muse brothers being kidnapped and sold to the circus, but he didn't know for sure if it was true or not. But he knew there was a story there, and he knew that she was the reason nobody had been able to get the story. And what he said that really kind of made the hair stick up on the back of my neck to a young reporter was, it's the best story in town, but nobody's been able to get it. And I thought, well, I haven't tried. So I waltzed in to the goodie shop, probably the next week. This is around 1991. And I asked if I could interview her Uncle Willie. The oldest brother, George, died in the 1970s, but Uncle Willie was still alive, and he was in his 90s. He actually lived to be 108. He died in 2001. He was on no medications. So he's already got me beat. And she said, no, you're never going to get to interview him. Don't even, just shush. Stop asking. And in fact, she pointed to a sign that a customer had made for her, which should have been my first clue about her. A customer had made her a sign with a stencil that said, sit down and shut up. And that was on her wall, and that was her answer. She said, he's been exploited his whole life, he's resting, he's retired. And then later, she said, maybe I'll let you write about them after Willie dies. So we did do that. He died in 2001. We wrote a series for the newspaper, and she didn't tell us much, and it turns out she really didn't know that much. I mean, the pinnacle moment in the book happens in 1927, and that is the brothers have been trafficked for a period of at least 13 years, and they've been told to quit crying, their mother is dead, and suddenly, somehow, Harriet Muse, their mother, finds out, or she thinks she knows, that they're now traveling with Ringling Brothers and Barnum Bailey, and the circus is coming to Roanoke. So she's moved from True Vine, from the world of tobacco sharecropping, and she's in Roanoke now, trying to get work and get information about her sons.